believe there's still work to be done. Although I recognize that a lot of progress has been made. The world today is extremely different than the world when I started my career, right? In a good way, in a positive way. Now, the first thing, again, I will go back to culture preconception. I mean, companies need to believe, first of all, that diversity is good for them, right? Not just something that investors impose. Everybody, and it's funny in some ways because everybody acknowledges diversification benefits in portfolio, and then they somehow just don't see it when it comes to team composition, right? And they keep hiring exactly the same profile people. So the first step is always, we need to believe that there's a reason we're doing it that is good for us, right? Not just to meet quotas. But in any case, outside of that, now, the biggest problem I see in being effective in that, in meeting those, meeting diversity or being effective in that sense, even if you really truly believe and want to engage, that is that the candidate pool can be narrow or shallow. The more senior you go. You in junior year, and I mean that's generally widely accepted, right? That in junior levels you have a much more balanced representation of gender, ethnic, or whatever it is. The more senior you go, that's where you run into. And now speaking more about female, for example, the more senior positions and roles you get, that's where it becomes, the more imbalanced. Or to say another reality that a lot of people hide behind is that they meet their quotas on senior levels from consistently less investment roles, right? So you see senior people in operations, HR, sales, IR, and they are senior positions. But at the same time, if you look narrowly, board composition or investment team or investment committee composition, you still actually is not that diversified, right?
Yeah.
So interested there, a lot of it goes back to actually availability of candidates. So there is, in my opinion, my suggestion or solution is to work with creating available candidate pool. And I've heard about interesting practices today in other firms where they start internship programs or training programs for board members, for, let's call it female or minorities, right? So you allow people that you think have the right profile otherwise, but not maybe the experience to cut it, to make it for the job, by training them into the role. So this way, when there is a next role opening, you have an actually more diverse pool of candidates to select from. Because at the same time, even though obviously I'm all for diversity, you cannot choose just because of that, right? It has to be the right skill set, not only on a diversity level, but actually on skill set. So a lot of it, in my opinion, has to do with working and helping. Is it female? Is it other ethnic minorities, to actually have access and build up the experience to be competitive candidates, among others. I'm a female founder in private equity, but within private equity, within real assets, right? And that's even less diverse.
Quite a niche person.
so a lot of it is soft biases that even women have when they're making career choices, right? Because it's not only choices of white male choosing the next candidate for the next job opening, going back to the pool of candidates, etc. It's actually interesting, and for me was eye-opening is when I participated in a mentorship program or actually I read a research report from universities, and women graduates chose not to go into industries that were perceived as more cutthroat or more white male industries, right? And that actually hit you, and you're realizing that the problem starts much earlier on. It's softer biases, right? Or cultural things that we all build up much earlier on than we think. It's not just unfair treatment when we are already a VP. For a lot of qualified or quality and competent people, it starts much earlier on when they are making a decision: should I go into finance or should I become an engineer, or should I choose a marketing career versus should I choose an investment career? Should I go into consumer products versus should I go into energy, right? So actually a big effort of mine personally now is to participate in mentorship programs or that are targeted to young graduates, or even high schools, right? Where you really are still working, building up, you know, the preconceptions, or building up the expectations of people on how to think about things. And actually that's contrary to a lot of my peers or professionals who think that mentorship in such young ages, I mean, you know, it's less effective, or people don't know what they want, which is all true. But then mentorship is not only about career advice or getting them into a role, right? It's also actually in helping people how to think about an industry. And private equity, quite frankly, needs to do a lot of work in that, right? Because there has been such bad legacy from time to time about private equity. And still, you hear people, you tell them you're in private equity and they go, oh, you know, you're a bad person, most probably not. So I actually make it a big effort of mine, and I'm very supportive of mentorship programs and equivalent, you know, diversity programs, even at high schools or universities.
Ultimately, Alex, we think that diversity equals alpha. Okay, having the ability to bring people from different backgrounds that have different experiences brings different perspective to certainly the investment process, but to everything we do. And in it when it comes to Palladium, we've developed an entire strategy around it. You know, when we sit in front of Hispanic owners or female of MWB, a company that is owned by a female or someone from a diverse background, there's a certain affinity and that we can create, and that gives us an advantage when it comes to sourcing and making investments. And it's also, we also find that some of those investment opportunities are underlooked or overlooked, and that I think gives us an edge.
With Middle Ground, 50% of the partnership is female. 2 of the founders came, you know, from industry. You know, that's a different makeup. We have 1 female African-American partner. You know, those having that different experience at the leadership level is what attracts people at all different levels to come join your team. So it was one of the key reasons I joined Middle Ground, was because of that differentiated, diverse set of experiences that team had. And we've been able to kind of continue to drive that diversity, both, you know, gender and ethnicity kind of focused, you know, throughout the organization as we've built our team. And our senior management team, as an example, is 57% female. And so I think that's very unique for leadership, you know, at a private equity firm, to have, you know, that level of women, you know, making key decisions, you know, along with the rest of the team. We've even, you know, started an initiative here called Women's Wing. That's for all the women in the firm. I think we're now up to, you know, 20 women, or maybe even more. It's hard to keep track when you're growing this fast, Alex, but 20 women, where we get together monthly to talk about, you know, a range of topics covering everything from, you know, personal financial health, you know, messages of empowerment from women in different industries. We bring in guest speakers, you know, work-life balance, and we run the gamut and make sure we get together and meet as a group once a month to, you know, facilitate, you know, kind of conversation and discussion around different issues that women face, you know, advancing in their careers. So that's been a really positive development that we've launched at the beginning of this year, as an example.
One of the things that, to your point, Alex, on the diversity is, and it's a unique element of the diversity that I'm starting to see that I think is just wonderful, is private equity firms, I mean, have always had operational partners, or they've always had, you know, people who have experience running businesses who, you know, will join as, we'll call it operational partner, an ops person, right? It's very popular in private equity to have a member of the team as an ops person. So that obviously is growing. But what I'm finding fascinating is to see private equity firms bring on board people in their 60s, people in their 70s even, who've done that. Maybe sometimes been an entrepreneur, ran a company, sold it, and become part of the team who then, to your point, relate to an owner who's in there, because of course we're dealing with a generational shift right now. Succession plan. We've heard about this for so many years, right? This bulge of company owners in their 60s and their 70s, and now even in their 80s who are selling their businesses, right? We're finally there, right? I think COVID has kind of really unleashed this whole, we've been waiting for it. Everybody said they're coming, that whole generational change. And what I'm seeing in terms of another interesting thing is private equity firms bringing on board owners who are in their older, established professionals who, maybe they've sold their business, maybe they're not ready to retire. So the diversity isn't just diversity, it's even diversity in terms of age. It's even that 65, 70-year-old team members are now been brought on. Why? Because they sell particularly well to an owner who says, I've sold to these people, or I've sold my business to private equity. Look how well it's been for me, and that whole, because of the generational shift, that ability to bring onto the team people who have the same life experience as the entrepreneur. And so what's great is we're I think that, one of the other things I think we're going to see in private equity firms are a lot more team members who are 60, 70s. Now, obviously people want to retire, but it's interesting to see when it's used as a part of the strategy to sell the success of a firm in a competitive process. This idea of, I will take care of your, this is what you built. Look who is going to be part of our team. He's, an owner who we bought the business from 10 years ago. But more interestingly is to see these older team members who play an active role. They're not just being brought out as, show. I mean, that's been going on. We've seen that, right? Hey, look, meet somebody. But we're seeing these people who actually play an operational role in their 60s and their 70s in these new mandates. As opposed to retiring, they're actively involved in new mandates. So it's interesting to see that the diversity is even happening at the kind of older stages of the life cycle. And I think it makes sense because owner operators like to see, to your point, they identify, right? They identify with somebody who's in their 60s and their 70s and they're still active and they're still engaged, and they're going to help come in and join the team to play a role to help this business grow.